Most great classical musicians don't love music. There is a story that Bernard Williams, the great philosopher, told about how Isaiah Berlin, his philosophical friend, introduced him to the great baritone Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau. And Isaiah turned to Fischer-Dieskau and said, "This is Bernard. Bernard is a great opera lover." And Fischer-Dieskau said, "Well, I am not." And when Bernard was recounting this later, and he recounts it in one of his essays on opera, he said, look, Fischer-Dieskau's reaction was about the fact that a precondition of loving something very much is that you despise most manifestations of it. This is what we're talking about on this episode. Let's go. There are two kinds of musician. On the one hand, you've got folks who love being connected with musical process, who love being engaged with music making. On the other hand, you've got people who love being connected to musical process, but only if the musical process has something in particular to say. Something that is distinctive and extraordinary. They don't love it as an end in itself. They're not addicted to it, and it really is of no interest to them unless the musical process at hand meets very particular criteria which they have. If it doesn't, they lose interest. But the music-loving folks, the folks who are just connected with musical process, are people who of course aren't equally drawn to everything musical, but they're people who remain interested much longer as long as you keep giving them music, almost no matter what that music is. If we look at the classical music world around us, we see that there are two great conductors on the platform today, Simon Rattle and Ivan Fischer. And statistically unusually, they are both in the realm of music lovers. They both love being connected with musical process. This is an important qualification before we go on. We are not making a distinction between good and bad or bad and good. There are great and poor musicians in both of the camps that we are elaborating. So let's say a couple of words about Simon Rattle. Simon Rattle is, in a kind of costless way, a music lover. In other words, that he loves being connected with musical process, often draws him to play not very impressive pieces, but it takes nothing away from his readings of the greatest masterpieces. So it's relatively costless. Simon can engage on the highest level with Haydn, Bach, Mozart, Mahler, Beethoven, you name it. But he'll also not shy away from playing a bit of Gershwin on the side. And somebody from that second group who only is engaged with musical process for the sake of something that's an extraordinary result and a distinctive contribution would say, well, what are you doing, Simon? In fact, that is what Alfred Brendel, who is perhaps the greatest of the living musicians, used to say about Simon Rattle. Why is Simon wasting his time on playing third-rate music when time is so precious? That wasn't a criticism from Alfred to Simon. It was just an observation of fact, because Alfred would not invest his energies like this. He would not play third-rate music when he can play for the 79th time a Beethoven sonata. Now, Ivan Fischer is also a man who gives us the most extraordinary readings of the great Central European masterpieces and much else too. But it's completely not out of character for Ivan Fischer to sit down and recompose the song Happy Birthday.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
And find that terribly delightful and involving. He loves doing music. And again, in his case, this doesn't take away from operating on the highest level when he is engaged with a great masterpiece. there is one kind of career impact that this distinction sometimes produces. It doesn't happen all the time, but it's a fairly common occurrence. And that's that the people in the first group, the people who are in love with the musical process, often struggle to retire and stop in time if they are a practicing performing musician. So you often see people who should stop at 70 or 75 or 80, but they go on until they're 90. And sometimes they become what Alfred Brendel once called glorifications of arthritis. Often, these situations are actually immensely moving and humanizing and beautiful. But often they're not. Often it's just a personal embarrassment and a certain kind of disrespect for the pieces that are being played. So that's a trap that the person in the first category, in the music lover category, is often going to be at risk of falling into, whereas people in the second group, people who only want musical process if it gives them something else, well, these people are less likely to fall into the I can't retire trap. I fall exclusively into the second group. I don't love musical process. I despise most expressions of classical music performance and most expressions of classical music composition. I am not drawn in by musical process itself to any degree at all. Now, that doesn't mean I will never study pieces that I think are less than masterpieces. I am curious to look, let's say, at the early sonatas of Schubert, which are not on the highest level of production. But nevertheless, I'm still looking at them with a view to what he went on to do later. I'm looking at them with a view to understanding the evolution of his style. But if you just give me music for music's sake, it's gonna do nothing for me at all. I might as well eat cardboard or try to grind a brick or engage in some other activity that just means zilch to me personally. Question of the day: do you see yourself more in the first or in the second category? And does the distinction make sense to you? Leave me a comment below, and for us to catch up again soon, subscribe to this channel and hit the notifications bell. Thank you so much for watching.